Great to see you folks. I'm Bobby Broyles along with Tim McDonald with this edition of This Week in CAA Football presented by Geico. A fantastic week for the conference, Tim, once again as the league continued to make its presence felt during the non-conference play across the board. Many headlines to get to, but let us begin with another FBS victory for CAA Football as New Hampshire knocked off Georgia Southern in Birmingham.
2 weeks down, 2 wins for CAA Football against FBS competition, and UNH brought back the old New Hampshire script logo for the alternate helmet. Don't see that with New Hampshire often, but it must have worked down in Alabama. Remember, this was a game moved to Legion Field, the home of UAB, because of Hurricane Irma. The Cats jumped out early, and they jumped out often, 22-0 at halftime. You look across the board, 11 catches and 2 touchdowns for Neil O'Connor, absolutely the go-to guy. Trevor Knight only had 13 completions, and 11 of them went to Neil O'Connor. The defense kept Georgia Southern in check, 8 tackles for loss in that game, and 5 sacks. Held on late for that 22-12 win. It was the first FBS victory for the Wildcats since 2009. And more importantly, I think, Bob, first 2-0 start in 8 years for New Hampshire.
Yep.
You see the league also grabbed another top 25 road win. This time it was Richmond at Colgate. Flipping back and forth between games, the Spiders battled throughout and made some huge stops, especially late. Led by Defensive Player of the Week, Andrew Clyde. He did just about everything that was asked of him in that second half. And Griffin Trow came through that 29-yarder. 1:29 left on the clock, clinched the 20-17 victory. We knew that was going to be a close game.
Yep.
We knew it was going to come down to the wire. And Richmond, you have to be happy if you're coming out with a victory. Also saw 3 road wins. Elon, Albany, and William & Mary. The Phoenix rallied for a 34-31 win at Furman behind 301 yards and 3 touchdowns from freshman quarterback Davis Cheek. Owen Johnson's 36-yard field goal with 5 seconds left secured it. The Danes shut out Morgan State 26-0, only gave up 229 yards of offense and was led again by freshman Carl Mofer. He had 2 touchdowns and 98 yards on the ground. Then you look at the Tribe. Tommy McKee tossed 3 scores and ran for 114 yards in a 20-6 win at Norfolk State. The first William & Mary quarterback, by the way, to rush for over 100 yards since 2000. So Good for Tommy McKee, good for the Tribe as well to get in the win column. Ranks 3rd right now currently in the CAA for rushing. That's Tommy McKee. Shouts to him for that. Maine and JMU picked up huge, not just big, but huge home wins.
Yep.
Mike and I were in Orono for the Black Bears, 60-12 rout over Bryant. And believe me when I say at halftime, we were looking at each other like, what is going on? But Josh Mack, 255 yards, that was a career high, and 3 touchdowns. And you look at JMU, limited ETSU to 175 total yards of offense. Brian Short had his own school record with 5 touchdowns passing in the 52-10 win. And you can't forget, of course, I know we had a conference game last week, but you can't forget about Stony Brook beating Rhodey in Kingston for its first league win of 2017. Joe Carbone passed for 184 yards and 2 touchdowns, and both of those touchdowns through the air went to Ray Bolden. It seemed like every highlight was a slant pass touchdown to Ray Bolden in the 35-18 victory. All in all, CNA went 6-0 versus FCS foes and improved to 9-1 this season in FCS non-conference play. That says it all to cap a phenomenal weekend across the board.
Well, it's a perfect segue into Week 3 action featuring a full slate of 11 non-conference matchups for the league. Starting at 1 o'clock, New Hampshire rides its big win last week on the road. Again, this time they make the short trip to Holy Cross.
The quality wins, and not just big wins, but quality wins to open the season if you're New Hampshire right now. You have to be really happy where you're at. You beat arch rival Maine at home, and then you head it to Georgia Southern in a game played in Alabama neutral setting, and you upset the FBS foe. Both of those wins might end up looking better as the weeks continue to roll on, which is only good moving forward. And you're going to hear it leading in many times, and I'm going to repeat it here again, but you have to contain and manage Peter Buchholz, the Holy Cross quarterback, and that passing attack for Holy Cross. It's a complete flip of the strategy this week for the Wildcat defense. I thought against Georgia Southern, Jawan Horton, Rick Ellison, Rick Holt, all of them spearheaded a complete and total team effort against the option last week and got it done. But now you have to expect the opposite plan against the 1-1 Crusaders. Again, the Crusaders playing in their home opener too. A year ago, New Hampshire outlasted Holy Cross 39-28 in the inaugural game at Wildcat Stadium. Buchholz attempted 64 total passes and had 427 yards and 3 touchdowns. Ate the secondary up a little bit in that game. And the Wildcats have to keep the pass game X plays, those big X plays, to a minimum. Holy Cross pushed UConn to the limit in week 1. A lot of people remember that. Lost 27-20 and answered last week with a 20-0 shutout at Bucknell. Outside of the obvious keys, stop the pass attack, stop Peter. Outside of the obvious, starting fast is the biggest eye-opener for this team through 2 weeks. The Cats are outscoring opponents 39-10 in the first half versus being outscored 25-7 in the second half of games. interestingly enough, all the success that New Hampshire's had, all the playoff success, no player on the UNH roster right now has been on a team that started 2-0, and that's exactly why the chance to move to 3-0 is that much more important right now.
Also at 1 o'clock, Rhode Island stays home again to take on Harvard out of the Ivy League. The Rams are still looking for their first win of the year, but this is Harvard's first game of 2017 as well.
We know how weird that Ivy schedule can work sometimes. And how much of a factor is that going to play in favor of Rhode Island? I think a decent amount, actually, in my mind, simply because it's all of a sudden a really big game for Rhodey, and it's only week 3. And I say that cautiously because I know we talked a lot. We gave a lot of attention to the Rams, a lot of credit to the Rams. After that 3-overtime loss at Central Michigan, and then you host Stony Brook in the opener, all the excitement, and rightfully so, I should say. This slow start last week led to a 14-0 halftime hole, and all of Rhodey's 45 points scored so far this season have come in the second half or in overtime. So slow starts have kind of hurt this team a lot, especially on offense, obviously. And it's not a win-or-go-home mentality yet, and it's not win and the season's fixed. But there has to be some pressing attitude to come out strong against a team playing for the first time in 2017 on your own home turf. That's the positives I think you take into this one against a Crimson team picked to win the Ivy League this year. And Harvard has won both of these games handily each of the last 2 years and brings back its leading passer, rusher, and tackler. So I think Rhodey understands Harvard. This is going to be a tough game, but last week's loss to the Seawolves, we saw both Tyler Harris and Shajuan Lawson play, and that might be the case again if the consistency isn't there, especially in one half. We're talking about the offense only coming in the second half. It could come down to smaller details like costly interceptions, costly fumbles. I mean, the first play of the game was a fumble returned by Stony Brook and taking care of field position opportunities, especially at key moments, most of which last week the Rams did not capitalize on.
At 2 o'clock on Comcast Sportsnet Mid-Atlantic Plus, the Richmond Spiders welcome Howard to town in their home opener. A familiar face will be on the sidelines across from the Spiders this Saturday,
This
Tim.
one is slowly bringing out the headlines. Before the season started, think about it. If this game was in week 1, the hype and the attention would focus just solely on Mike London's return and how Mike London is coming back to coach on the opposite side. But Howard's start to the first 2 weeks of the season have changed that quickly.
Yes.
Former Richmond head coach Mike London, of course, leads the Bison now out of the MEAC. And, of course, plenty of people in CAA football, plenty of people in the state of Virginia know that Coach London helped the Spiders win a national title in 2008. Then he left for the UVA job in 2010. And not sure, though, if many people know that his current UR coach Russ Huseman was the defensive coordinator during that same time. I know we've hinted on it a little bit this season, but the connection that those two share is also interesting. Think about the schemes going through the heads and the minds. But Howard played back-to-back FBS teams to open up the season. Started with a 43-40 win at UNLV. That grabbed major headlines around the country. Everyone adding it as the largest upset in college football history because of the point spread. But I beg to differ. NCAA, don't bet on it. We're not point spread guys anyway. So regardless, the Bison almost pulled off another one last week at Kent State, losing 38-31 in the final minutes. Had a nice comeback, but fell short. Kalen Newton, we know, we've read Bleacher Report, we've seen ESPN. He's the younger brother of Cam Newton and is a true freshman starter right now under center. And Richmond has to stop the run first. That's how Howard has got this momentum early, averaging right now 267.5 yards per game, but on the other hand allows 319 against the run. So the Spiders enter 1-1 overall. I'll talk about the Spiders now. Got it out a tough road win at Colgate, but still have answers of their own. And I think it's interesting. You look at the rush game, averaging right now, I know it's only been 2 games, 84 yards per contest, and I think it's still trying to figure out how to share the wealth of players and capable players in the backfield between 4 solid guys. You look at Gordon Collins, Xavier. How do you say this is who we're going to lean on? I think that's been hard so far. Kyle Oletta needs 148 yards right now to go over 1,000 for the season. Ridiculous, and it's already
Week 3.
Week 3 of the season, game 3. So he's probably going to get to that. But the difference for me is the weapons, and it's the weapons on the outside right now for Richmond. Brissett and Simpson, both of them have shown that they're the go-to guys. And in fact, playing at home, I think it helps that much more for a team that has already been tested and already been tested twice on the road to come back home and kind of settle down. I think that's key for Richmond heading into a game where the headlines have quickly changed and altered as this one gets closer.
So we're hoping for Cam Newton's little brother not to be doing any dabbing in the end zone.
Hopefully no dabbing, please.
A pair of 3:30 contests start with JMU as the number 1 ranked Dukes finish non-conference play with Norfolk State at home on Masson 2.
Not much messing around last week for JMU in its opener versus ETSU, and we talked about how they can't afford to mess around and shine through. The Dukes racked up 304 yards through the air and 5 short touchdowns. Ishmael Hyman, Riley Stapleton, each set career highs with 2 touchdowns apiece. The offense kind of did what it wanted to. Defense just gave up 57 yards and 8 tackles for loss. I mean, you talk about 57 yards against the rush. Norfolk State has struggled to score consistently through the first 2 games. Right now, only averaging 8 points per contest. In that 20-6 loss at home versus William & Mary last week, the Spartans allowed 5.4 yards per carry on the ground and over 200 yards against the Tribe. Coach Houston even, I thought it was interesting, hinted in postgame that the offense still has not performed up to his level and the way that he wanted the offense to perform, especially at home. But even after putting up 52 points. So just goes to show you where the bar for the Dukes are right now. 52-10, still got a lot of work to do. But almost 25,000 fans came out to Bridgeforth last Saturday, and you can bet it's going to be similar this week in what should be hopefully the final tune-up to wrap up non-conference play before Maine visits the Berg next week. And the way the JMU defense has played thus far, it's going to be very, very difficult to try and keep up the pace if you're Norfolk State.
Another Ivy League matchup takes place in Newark as the Blue Hens return home to take on Cornell.
I thought it was interesting. The thing that I take away from the Virginia Tech loss, I'm disappointed, but I'm not discouraged. Words of wisdom from Danny Rocco post-game in Delaware's 27-0 loss at VTech in a rare FBS game where plenty knew it would be incredibly hard to come away with a win, and it kind of proved that way on the scoreboard. I mean, 10 total punts, 2 turnovers, and 223 total offensive yards for the Hens. And whether you want to look at it the score, 27-0, not that bad. Giving up just 2 touchdowns on offense. It's not easy to sit here and pick and choose the things that led to the loss. It's kind of is what it is against a really good FBS team, a ranked FBS team, and it's time to move on to Cornell. That's the only thing you can do right now.
Yep.
The Big Red, like Harvard, have yet to start their 2017 season due to the way scheduling works in the Ivy League. Fewer games on the schedule, so they don't start until the second week some years. But Cornell started 2016 3-0, but went 1-6 down the stretch. And right now, if you're Delaware, it's a great chance for UD to build some shape on offense. The balance has been there. I mean, granted, it's only been 2 games, 166 rushing yards per game, 161 passing. But we want to find out where that focal point is and where does it all start up front. Does it come first from the pass game? Does it Thomas Jefferson? Where do you start if you're the offense? I think that's what you're looking for. In the last 27 non-conference home games, the Blue Hens are 25-2, and Coach Rocco and crew would love nothing more than to enter a bye week sitting at 2-1 before an enormous home test versus JMU. That's 2 weeks from now on September 30th.
Moving to the 6 o'clock kickoffs as Villanova welcomes Lafayette for the Wildcats home opener. Nova almost added another FBS win for the conference last Saturday, Tim.
That's one of those weird ESPN 3 games where you're kind of, I'll come back to this in the fourth quarter, hopefully not miss anything.
Yep.
Wildcats looked like they were down and out, but found something left in the tank late against Temple. They erased a 13-point deficit, tied the game late before losing 16-13. A 49-yard kick with 1 minute to play sealed the deal for the Temple win. Zach Bednarczyk completed 27 of 41, passed for a career-high 382 yards and 1 touchdown, and Nova actually outgained Temple 402 yards to 353. But the Cats couldn't find room on the ground, and it was interesting. You see 20 yards total on the ground rushing in 30 attempts, just so uncharacteristic of that Villanova offense. 16 points allowed were the fewest versus an FBS team all time for Villanova, and another difficult one to swallow considering how close the program has come in recent years to nearly pulling off the upset. Think back to the Syracuse game, you think back to the UConn game in Boston College. You get the idea of how close those opportunities have been, so it's a tough one. But you still hold a spot right now in both polls among the top 10 nationally, and you finally come back home to face a team in Lafayette that's 0-2. It's the only home game for Villanova, let's remember, until October 7th. Remember last year the Wildcats won at Lafayette in kind of a game where 31-14 closed the door on non-conference play with a bang.
Yep.
I think it's the same spot this year, and you cannot afford to look ahead to games at Albany and at Towson looming to finish the month. Much like other teams that we've talked about, the run game should get its mojo this week throughout the contest, considering the Leopards allow 231 yards per game and average just 19.5 on the other end.
The CAA football game of the week on College Sports Live will be Elon playing host to Charleston Southern. The Phoenix looking to build off that huge road win, Tim.
That was a win where I think anyone in CAA football, not just Elon fans, were really pumped to see that. Because, again, it's a team from the SoCon. Elon, what a response for the Phoenix last weekend at Furman, a game. Not a lot of people had Elon pulling out a win. Not a lot of people had Elon playing close. That was great to see. Davis Cheek threw 3 touchdowns, 2 of which went to Trey Lennon, and Owen Johnson kicked the first 2 field goals of his career. We saw the latter, no big deal, just won the game for the Phoenix with 5 seconds left. But that was the difference maker, and both of those players picked up weekly CAA honors for their efforts. 34 points was the most for Elon in a game since 2013, and you have to believe the fight shown only boosts belief moving forward for this team. In comes nationally ranked Charleston Southern, and the Bucks, a really interesting matchup this week just because the Bucks had their game against South Carolina State postponed due to Hurricane Irma last weekend. opened the year on September 2nd against Mississippi State and lost 49-0, so I'm not sure what you take away from that one, an SEC team. But hard to believe Elon would be the team coming into this one with the most momentum, and you can throw in another wrench, like we said, with CSU playing an SEC team on the road in week 1 and having that time to recoup and collect. Keep an eye on the first half rhythm on offense for Elon, and if Cheek and Braylon Cyphers waste little time, or if they waste little time to get out of the gates like it did versus Furman, that only means good things can happen on offense for Elon.
It's been very impressive watching all these freshmen for Elon really step up last week for the Phoenix. On CA.TV at 6 o'clock, Bucknell makes the trip to Williamsburg to take on the Tribe.
Love the fact that Tommy McKee right now is third in CA football for rushing, 101.5 yards per game, and he showed some guts the first 2 weeks of the season. He's kind of that quarterback who might not be 6'4" and jacked, but he's out there getting the job done. He might be limping, but you know he's going back to the sideline, and you know he's going to still lead the offense, and that's for sure. The Tribe led Norfolk State 13-3 at half. It wasn't the greatest offensive first half, but finished with 20-6, only allowed 2 field goals, 206 rushing yards as the team stood true throughout. 4 different players, in fact, rushed for at least 20 yards in the win. But besides facing 2 totally different teams, you talk about UVA, the Norfolk State, in the first 2 games, the Tribe D, I think, has been solid so far. 96.5 rush yards allowed per game. NSU had just 12 first downs and went 3 of 13 on third down. Bucknell, as we mentioned, lost to Holy Cross last week, 20-0, and are 1-1 overall. But right now, it's a committee of guys on offense for the Tribe. It's not really anyone standing out every week pulling up the numbers, which I think is kind of interesting, and led by Tommy McKee. And solid chance yet again for a team to start its home slate on a high note before entering a bye week. Wrap up non-conference play, get to the bye week at 2-1, and that only means good things moving forward for the Tribe.
And we wrap up with the 6 o'clock contest with Stony Brook at home versus Sacred Heart. Seawolves looking for a little revenge in this game, Tim.
Interesting. Last year, remember, they come off the Richmond game. We'll get into that, but the Seawolves only had 112 rushing yards last week in the 35-18 road win at Rhodey, but I think made up for it in other ways that we might have not seen this team make up for it in the past. Efficient plays, we're talking about 5 for 5 in the red zone, 2 picks, and never really let the Rams creep back in it. Just when you think Rhodey was going to come close, Rhodey had to settle for a field goal. Rhodey got a turnover, so Stony Brook really showed up, I think, in a different light last week. Stacey Bedell and Donald Leontine provided a nice 1-2 punch, 42 and 43 yards each, accounting for all 3 rushing scores. And after that huge win versus Richmond at home almost a year ago, Stony Brook dropped a 38-10 game, also at home to Sacred Heart. And that loss, I don't think it ruined the year, and I don't think it changed things huge. But you can guarantee it certainly left a mark at the end of the season when they sat back and thought about games that they should have showed up for. I think that Sacred Heart game was a prime example of that. 2-0 record for the Pioneers heading in, and they proved, obviously, that they can compete with the Seawolves, especially after last season. Carbone coming off that career-high passing game last week, and Stony Brook should be ready to go this time around in the first home game at Laval Stadium this year.
At 7 o'clock, Towson will be on the road again this Saturday as they take on St. Francis.
Redshirt freshman quarterback Ryan Stover provided just about all the sparks on offense last week, completing 21 passes for 210 yards and 2 touchdowns in his first career start. The Tigers lost to a very good Maryland team, so the highlights, I mean, it's easy to point out the highlights, but it was 63-17 the final. Stover had 52 yards on the ground as well, and Shane Simpson came through with 158 all-purpose yards. But it's just one of those games where it's hard to judge the scoreboard. It's hard to judge the end product because of the opponent and the quality of opponent. St. Francis put up a fight at Towson a year ago, if you remember that one.
Oh, yeah.
Towson had to come back at home and battle for that win. Christian Summers had a huge game in that one. And this will be no easy task for the Tigers, facing a dangerous offensive team that went to the playoffs last year, by the way. Remember, they lost to Nova in the first round. Third straight home game for SFU, entering at 2-0, and right now averaging over 300 yards passing, which is going to raise some antennas if you're the Tigers. Towson run game needs some answers quickly, and they need it this week right away. 58 yards per game right now, and it's relying heavily on Shane Simpson. The good news, Towson knows it's in for a tough game on the road against an NEC team. The hard news, if it's a shootout, we don't know right now if the Tigers, how they're going to handle being in that situation with a squad that hasn't faced that in quite a while.
And we wrap up week 3 with the Great Danes home opener as they host Monmouth at Bob Ford Field on ESPN3.
I think it's a fitting end to week 3 as the 1-1 Danes responded from that Old Dominion loss, an Old Dominion game that they easily could have won with a 26-0 shutout over Morgan State. First shutout since 2014, by the way, for Albany. And it looks like for the time being, we don't know what's going to happen with the IH, but Carl Mofer right now is the real deal for now. He had 98 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns last week, set the tone Will Brunson found Jordan Crockett for a big 34-yard touchdown before the half. I thought that sparked the offense leading into the second half. Ethan Stark came through with 2 field goals, and the defense forced 2 fumbles and blocked a punt in the dominating victory. Monmouth enters 2-0, having won at Lafayette and at Lehigh last week. At home versus Lehigh last week. And that was a shocker considering how good Lehigh played against Villanova. And by the way, it was 46-27. So Monmouth definitely coming in this one, raising some eyes as well. Heard possibilities of Elijah Ipitoken-Hanks returning this week, but only time will tell. For now, the run game has been figuring things out without him for the time being. If it's Mo Furr, if it's another player. Right now, if you're EIH, we want to see him return, but things have been working. So we'll see how the Danes handle that moving forward.
I mean, it only makes them that much better to have a preseason All-American back there in the backfield. You can find live scoring and live stats for Saturday's games on casports.com/live scores, and come back over again for our Sunday rewind on cafootball.com.
You can find us on social for Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Just search CAAFB and join the convo as well throughout the season using the hashtag CAAFB. We're back on the road this week for on-campus coverage at Richmond, so definitely stay tuned for more. I know Instagram, Snapchat, all of that stuff, great content moving forward, especially when we're on campus. You never know what can happen. We talked to some dogs last week. We talked to a live bear, so you never know what can happen.
You also burnt your tongue, it looked like.
We'll sweep that one out of the road.
Speaking of content from your on-campus trip, make sure to check out the season debut of Going Deep this Thursday on cafootball.com with a feature on the Maine Black Bears.
And, I mean, all the things that you asked for in a start to a season, it came through at Maine for this on-campus trip. And a huge thank you as well to the Maine players, to the Maine coaches, and the Maine football program in Orono. I know Mike and I had a great time, but went over to a middle school, talked with some of the young students at the middle school, talked to the principal at the middle school. I don't want to give too much away, but a really neat way not only for the Maine football team to give back in the community, but a great way for the Maine football team and the players to have an impact on children in the local area. I'm not going to give it away too much, but you can come back, check out on social on Thursday. You can check out on cafootball.com. We'll give you times and we'll hype it a little bit more leading into Thursday, but really excited for the first feature.
Yeah, we'll look forward to seeing that. Once again, that is on Thursday. And also, if you haven't heard, the Yak is back. Yes, it is. Yes, the official CA Football podcast has returned this season. Check with cafootball.com every Friday for the latest episode.
What is it, lunchtime-ish? If you're driving in the car, you can
great
just
lunch break.
See a tweet, you can play the podcast. This is our chance to break down all the action without a script, so I know we really enjoy this, and Mike is the moderator, so I'm sure he loves that too. But you love hearing from the fans. We love hearing from you guys, the stories. If you have interviews, ideas, you can find the Yak on iTunes and SoundCloud as well. Again, nothing better to do at lunch on a Friday, so why not listen to the Yak?
Unscripted? Are you saying this is unscripted, not unscripted here?
We are never scripted, Bobby Broyles.
Good luck to all the CA football teams this week. Enjoy the games, everyone.